everybody for being here today. Of course, a special thank you to all of our expert panelists who I'm going to introduce in just a moment. My name is Kathleen. I'm the head of marketing here at Bravo. We also have Tally Mack, Bravo's CEO, with us today. Hi, Tally. And Tally will really be today's MC and panel moderator once we get into the discussion. But just a few things before we get started. We are recording the webinar today, so each one of you viewing will receive an email with the recording link. To all of our panelists, for the sake of time, Tally isn't necessarily going to be asking each question to every single one of you. However, we want the discussion to be really free-flowing, so jump in with your commentary, share your perspectives, even if the question wasn't directed towards you. And to our viewers, do not be shy to ask questions. We're here to add value and answer questions. So open the chat, open your Q&A. I will be monitoring that and we'll make sure questions get answered in real time. We are really grateful to have this lineup of heavy hitters on our webinar today, where we are going to be focusing on strategies for increasing pawnshop valuation. Our panel includes Steve Stallcup, who was kind enough to take this from the car. He's on a business trip right now. Steve is the founder and CEO of Stallcup Group. They're an exit strategy consulting group that helps pawn shop owners get the most out of the sale of their businesses. Steve is also highly respected as an advocate and an advisor to the owners that he works with. Steve, thank you so much for making time and being with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Next, we have Yigal Adato, who is very fun to hang out with at trade shows. He is the founder of Leaderado. He is also a well-known leadership expert, a speaker, an executive coach. You likely know him from his Pawn Leaders podcast, and he is the author of Pawn Profit Pillars. Yigal, it's always good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Likewise, thanks for having me.
Then we have Jerry Whitehead, also a blast to see at the trade shows. Jerry is the creator and the founder of Pawnshop Consulting Group, which has helped more than 600 clients worldwide with their full service consulting. And throughout Jerry's extensive career, he's been involved in the acquisition or the sale of more than 250 stores. Jerry, great to see you. Thank you.
Great to be here, and thank you for the invite.
And last but not least, we have Bravo's, drumroll, Bravo's very own Steve Mack. Steve is the founder, the former CEO, and now the chairman of Bravo. He expanded his family's one shop, pawn shop business in Reno to a 45-store multi-state enterprise, which became the largest privately held pawn shop company in the West Coast. And then later in 2004, Steve sold his pawn shop business to Cash America. Steve, it's always great to see you. Thanks for making the time to be here today.
Thank you, Kathleen.
All right, so with the breadth and depth of knowledge and the decades of experience we have on the call today, I'm excited just to jump in and start learning from the industry experts. So Tally, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thanks, Kathleen. All right, so we're going to start with a little warm up. It's going to be 1 minute for each panelist. I'll call on each of you as we go. So the question is, why should pawn shop owners be thinking about succession planning now? I'm going to start with Steve Stallcup on this one because this is his bread and butter, is getting people ready for succession planning. So even if people aren't thinking about it yet, why is it a good time to start thinking about it now?
It's one of the things that's most often overlooked. It's usually, in my experience, the last thing that's addressed, if ever. And you know, life happens, and when things happen, your staff, your number one manager goes out. Just as we all know, this runs stores, and we all have on this panel. It's you can get caught flat-footed pretty quickly, and you just need to have bench strength. And I get calls like that all the time, where owners have to come back out of retirement and run the store and run a group of stores. They didn't see that coming because they sold it to the staff, and the staff got, you know, just things happen. But you can't have too much bench strength, in my experience. And we really focused on that all the time when I was with Cash America, but we still got caught behind the 8 ball many times, often. So it's one of the most important things to prepare your store with the right staff and have the bench strength. I can't stress that enough, but it's not something you can decide you're behind on and get caught up on. It takes work now. to have people ready and trained and ready to go when the time comes.
Awesome. Jerry, over to you.
Totally agree. I can't tell you how many clients in times of recent that I'm handling situations that have arisen because somebody in the family or the network passed away. And unfortunately, that's not the best time to try to regroup and come back and try to establish what it is that you have. A lot of what we do, and like Steve's talking about, it's the preparation work. Having your valuations in order, or at least an idea of what you have, and try to assimilate some sort of a succession plan in the unlikely event something happens to somebody. There's been several just this year that I've had to contend with, and it's sad when it happens, and most of them are all unprepared. In some cases, you may have a spousal unit who's the survivor, who was inactive in the business, and they have no idea where they're starting at, and it's not a good place to be. So get your ducks in a row ahead of time is what we like to teach and preach.
Yigal, you and I met for coffee recently, and we were sort of talking about this. So I'm going to flip this over to you.
Yeah, it has to do with integrity and legacy. You can either leave a turd or you can leave a diamond to your family or to your manager, whoever's taking over. You can also give them what's called generational pawn trauma, which is something I came up with about 3 weeks ago, which is when you give succession planning to whoever's next, and they have to work 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, have the same stress, overwhelm, micromanagement that you went through. Or you can organize the business to not give that trauma to the next generation and leave with integrity and a great legacy. Your legacy isn't just money, right? Just leaving a big operation with tons of profit isn't just legacy. Legacy is also leaving peace. And so you've got to start working on that today with whoever is the successor of your business, family, not family, managers, even when you sell it. So that's the reason I would start working on it yesterday, to look on how to organize and lead the business so that your legacy stands true.
All right, Steve Mack.
Well, in the days of Super Pawn, succession planning was an essential part of just management planning, week to week, month to month, year to year. And we were constantly looking at organizational charts and just the normal course of employee turnover. You never know what's going to happen today and tomorrow. And certainly if you think about it and look at your organizational chart and look at your key roles, the what if scenario is just a great exercise to start, sooner than later. And that transitional, those transitional points of that you can pivot more quickly, and with the conversation that's already happened beforehand certainly comes into play. And I would imagine the smaller single store operators, which is super hard to do. It's usually a family operation, but that's kind of good old fashioned estate planning, sitting down and having those difficult conversations earlier than later.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, we've got a handful of topics that each person sort of specializes in, from operational efficiency to online sort of digital presence, how to expand your services within your single brick and mortar, how to differentiate yourself. So I'm going to start with Yigal and different building blocks to build like the best enterprise value or valuation. So Yigal, this one's for you. How does providing exceptional customer service then translate into enhanced business value?
Yeah. So we call it the epic experience. My belief is that customer service occurs when the customer is in the location. The epic experience starts when they see you online. Either they look at your Google reviews, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, wherever you're on. Then they drive up to your store. And then what's that experience look like? When they walk into your store, and then after the transaction, after they've left. My goal in working with clients in the past has always been for somebody to walk out of a store. And I think it's something that every pawnbroker should strive for, where they walk out and they turn around, they say like, that was a pawn shop? Like, wow, that's incredible. And word of mouth spreads way faster than any marketing that you can think of. And so in order to business, if you have this wow factor, this epic effect that we call it, you have the capability to spread way faster when it comes to new clients, bringing down your customer acquisition cost, not having to spend so much in marketing, and growing your business, because there's two ways to make more money. It's new clients and selling more to the current clients that you have. And so if you can bring in more new clients and serve the current clients to a level that's unheard of, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, it's not that hard these days. A lot of businesses, I just went to Austin, walked into like 6 shops. A lot of people are just serving at like a mediocre level, just doing what's necessary. You take that step above, you wow your customers, they start telling their comadres or compadres or family, their friends, how incredible you are. It's just free advertising, and you can grow it so much better that way.
Awesome. I'm going to have Steve Mack piggyback off of this, because obviously I grew up in stores, and there was a lot of attention paid at Super Pawn to providing exceptional customer service. So I'm going to have you talk about that a little bit. You're on mute. There we go.
Thank you. Well, it started off with how do you wrap a cord, and took a lot of pride in that. That little simple twist around your hand 5 or 6 times, and then 7 or 8 twists around the cord and into a nice little wrap, and leaving that on the shelf. Just, meant a lot more, looked a lot better, and I would say enhanced the resale value of that item significantly when that customer walked by there. The second example, there's hundreds, but the second example that come to my mind as you asked this question was during the holiday times, during Christmas. The time you took to actually wrap every package and put, nice Christmas paper around it. We took a lot of time, and we were very focused in electronics, jewelry, firearms, and we looked at each of those categories, how we were going to wrap those items. And the one that really strikes me is we would used to look at the jewelry, the ring boxes that we used to give away, and we'd put, a ring that we'd sell for $20, $200, $2,000 in this really kind of very flimsy see-through box. And we decided we're going to spend like $5. It was like for any ring that any customer bought, we put in. These really plush, white, soft, so special, and put that inside another box. We wrap that in really nice paper, and then learned how to, so you had the nice curl on it. And when you handed that in a bag with your logo on it, this is the same experience you have when you go to the best of the best of the best. And for an extra $5 for an item that someone walked out with in a form of a gift, it just set the mark. It didn't say pawn experience at all. And I think those are the kind of things that you can do in a very cost-effective way to make a real big difference and create a lifetime customer.
Wrapped a lot of ring boxes around Christmas. That was like my job. Jerry, anything to add on this topic?
Well, excuse me, these two certainly alluded to the importance of the customer experience, which I totally agree with. And something Yigal has said repeatedly through his career and activity is the wow experience. Because I've got a client group here in Dallas. I was out randomly in Dallas working with some folks and just stopped by one of their stores. I won't mention which Uncle Dan's that was, but as I was going up to the door, there were these 4 guys coming out, and they're going, "Man, what just happened in there?" They were all over it. They called 3 or 4 stores. They looked at the stuff online. They gave me a discount card, VIP service, and they were all high-fiving each other on their way out. And so the customer experience is extremely important, because that puts you, your brand, and your operation kind of on its own shelf over there, particularly in markets where we have a lot of competition and the big boxes do not service as well as a well-run independent does. And that's where the independents can really take advantage of their unique individuality, and you should capitalize on that. It's very, very important.
All right, Steve Stallcup, I'm going to hand this over to you. And then also, if you have anything additional to add on this, go ahead and add it. And then also, if you have any examples, doesn't have to be by name, but of pawn shops that have successfully enhanced their valuation or their enterprise value based on customer experience or going the extra mile, what that looks like when you are trying to sell a store that does that, maybe that versus one that doesn't.
Yeah, that's good. So I was thinking back to when I ran stores, and I started as early as in the 80s when I was talking about, and all the tangible stuff, what you do in the store and what it looks like is very important. But what I was preaching back then was tone, finesse, and sincerity, and the personal connection with the customer. You can't overdo that. And back then, I used examples that when you go to a brick and mortar, whether it's Home Depot or whatever it was, you could find bad service. So there's an opportunity for you to stand apart. They don't have to be a pawn shop. They could be anything, a furniture store, whatever. Well, guess what? Service is way worse than it was back in the 90s. It's probably worse. It's epically worse, to use one of Yigal's terms. It's epically worse. You can get online, talk to somebody. It's just you don't get the service you used to get. This is not Nordstrom's era anymore. So just by focusing on your customer service, I guarantee you everybody comes in your store that day has had a bad experience in the last month with service, whether it was online, on the phone, or in a brick and mortar. So they're going to go, oh, wow, this is a great service experience. I can't believe it. And it's a pawn shop too. So I always try to set myself apart, not just from my competitors, but from anybody in the service industry. Because right now it's low hanging fruit. And but there's a lot of stores that I have. I got a couple of stores that I talk to all the time in Arizona, thanks to Yigal, this type of a attitude. They've added so much to their business. I think they're a Bravo customer too. So that they claim that is helping them as well. So it's just absolutely important. But set yourself apart from anybody in the service industry. It's low hanging fruit because there's opportunities to illustrate your diligence towards that all over the place.
One thing just to piggyback off of this, whenever I talk to pawnbrokers and they talk about competition, usually, they're very narrowly focused on competition as being, pawn shops in their area. And I think just talking about any area where you're going into a brick and mortar and you've got the same type of inventory as that store is areas that as a pawnbroker, you should be walking into. It's like, whenever we onboard onto a new SaaS platform, it's like, that's where I go. I want to be on the implementation calls. If there's not in the same vertical as us, but it's the same, they sell a similar type service. So I think there's a lot of learning beyond just going into your competitor or assuming that you're, I hear oh, we're our biggest competitor, but really broadening the horizon of who you consider a competitor and looking for inspiration in all types of retail stores. Does anybody else have anything to add to that conversation? We've got lots to go through. Okay. Jerry, let's talk about an area that I think you specialize in, and that's really operational efficiency and looking into KPIs and metrics and numbers. So maybe you can share how improving operational efficiency foundationally really positively impacts business valuations that you've seen.
Well, absolutely. It's very important. What I have found in my journey in the 23 years I've been in the consulting lane is how undereducated many pawnbrokers are about their financial metrics, much less their key performance indicators. There have been so many clients that I've worked with over the years when we had an opportunity to work with them early on when they were considering selling their operations. So if I had time to work with them, in many cases, we were able to improve their KPIs. And that could be decreasing loan forfeitures, increasing the loan yield, increasing inventory turns, increasing inventory yields, decreasing aging inventory. All of these factors weigh heavily into how well your assets perform and your business. And the more in tune that the operators are with how they can effectuate change in those KPIs and enhance the various characteristics that contribute to the bottom line, ultimately enhances the value proposition on the other end. Because if somebody comes to me late in the game, they're wanting to sell their business, they got all this, let's say they have a high forfeiture rate, they've got a lot of inventory that's in pawn that should have been pulled. Those are non-performing assets. They've got all this aging inventory sitting around because they're in love with their inventory and they've been looking at it for 10 years. They wonder why they haven't sold it yet. That's a problem. Aging inventory and inventory in general doesn't necessarily yield more income during an acquisition. The public companies pay little interest in the inventory, generally speaking. And Steve could add to that one. The emphasis is really in customer acquisition. How well are my loans performing? What kind of history in the loan book do I have? And how well that loan balance is performing, along with a whole host of other metrics. And the metrics are extremely important. And the more efficiently you dial your store and your operation in, the more attractive that operation is from a valuation standpoint and potentially an acquisition standpoint that also ties in a host of other things such as market competition, where you're at, so on and so forth. The numbers are extremely important. And I have found consistently in my journeys around the world that the KPIs around the pawn industry are very much misunderstood by a wide range of operators. From some of those I would have least expected it from in some cases.
Steve Stallcup, other KPIs beyond those ones that Jerry rattled off that you pay extra attention to, or companies that are acquiring pay extra attention to, or maybe there's something new that companies that are acquiring that are paying extra attention to right now? You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry. Sorry about that. There's so many. Still?
No, good. You're good.
Nope. Oop, back on.
You're on mute now, Steve.
The delay. I think we're good.
Yeah, good.
Right. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. There's a lot of them. You can look at them all day long. Ratios, margins, percentages. But the thing I would say is, let's just book all of our income. Okay. When you're ready to possibly exit. And, there's a lot of things you can do, but truly, I mean, the buyer is going to look at your operation, and they're going to build a virtual pawn shop or group of stores the way they operate them. They're going to pull levers and do things on paper, knowing what they're going to do with your business. And they'll use those things that you're not doing as an excuse to pay less money. But the fact of the matter is, we want to build that pawn shop image on paper and show what you're doing. Because there's a lot of things that you're not going to want to do that they're doing that we know they're going to do. If we just know they're going to do them and we monetize that upside, that's what I'm talking about doing. But we could talk about margins all day long. There's a lot of them to look at. But I think, like Jerry said, let's talk about efficiencies and yields so that we're not too far off of the norm of what the buyer's comp stores are and what they're going to do. But we want to build the upside into the pro forma, the model that we use to market the business. So, because we know exactly what the buyers are going to do with it. They're going to pull this lever and not pull that one, but we know what the effect is going to be. But we got to be good at monetizing that, whether you're doing it or not, frankly, whether you execute that or not.
Absolutely. And I have one thing to add to that too. And Steve brings up a good point. There's a lot of times that I meet clients who on the front end of the conversation might indicate that they don't declare all of their income. And it's so important to wash everything through your business. Because I'll tell them I can't count what's in the shoebox. The only thing that I can legally count is what you report to the United States government. And so, in the more that you can flush into the bottom line to indicate what I'm really making in my business, and maybe trim up non-essential expenses so that you can enhance the bottom line, will improve your odds when it comes down to valuation time, for sure.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about additional services beyond sort of the customer experience that somebody might be able to start implementing or thinking about implementing. Online presence might be one of them. Yigal, I'm going to have you talk about that. Or just generally broaden the range of services. So I'm going to start with Steve Mack, and then I'm going to come over to Yigal. what areas can you, I guess, broaden in your current brick and mortar that make you either more efficient or additional services that you can add that bring value to your brand? You're on mute.
I'll figure that out sooner or later. Get all excited. Well, I mean, listening to all these guys talking about pawn shops, I just want all four of us to get together and open one. Well, it's sort of the dream that you decide when you open the doors in the first place. Like, what are you building, and what do you want to accomplish? What kind of store do you want to operate, and how many different services are you capable of handling? And as an entrepreneur, you really almost have to contain yourself and really focus on a few that you can do really well. Yeah. And so mastering whatever number that you decide, and making each one of those better and better and better until, you know, there's never ending, making things better. There's so many aspects of somehow enhancing your business, and that what I'm listening to everyone saying, enhancing their bottom line to do what? And all I can say in my years of running Super Pawn was I wanted to put every single extra dollar into my loan base, because the arbitrage on the dollars that most pawn acquirers look at, the first thing they want to know is, how big is your loan base? And everyone knows that you're going to get a multiple on loan base and then something for your inventory that's maybe over the dollar. And that's sort of a baseline. And so all these things we're talking about is these efficiencies, these new services, is to be able to squeeze out as many profit dollars you can per square foot you have in your store, given the number of employees you have, and acquiring as many customers as you possibly can. And so Yigal mentioned customer acquisition cost, CAC. And I always paid a lot of attention to how many customers did I have per store? How many customers am I acquiring every day? Because every single marketing dollar, the location I was paying for had everything to do with acquiring customers to come through my door more frequently. And then as the internet opened, and that just seems to be, if you have, of course, we're not we'll talk a little about technology, because as a single store operator, you only have so much time, so many resources to be able to do other things. So we'll talk about how technology can help you do more things more frequently, more easily, more automated. But that's my assessment on that.
Now you're muted, Tali.
I'm going to hand it over to you.
Sure. I just want to say something to piggyback off of Steve. In the industry, there's a majority of pawnbrokers and there's very few entrepreneurs. And in order to have massive success and sell your business for more, you must to become an entrepreneur. And it talks about what Jerry said. You've got to know your numbers, your KPIs, all of the metrics, and what Steve talked about. And most people are just technicians. They're just doing pawn. Here's money. Give me an item for money. And they have no idea what's going on. You know, their bookkeeper hands them numbers every year, every 6 months. And you can't expect an efficient operation if you're only a pawnbroker. I know that lots of people here, like, I'm a pawnbroker through and through. Listen, I'm a third generation pawnbroker. But what got my father successful, my uncle successful, and us successful was we become entrepreneurs. That's very, very different. Now you talk about like what services can you add to increase the value of your business. I'm not going to talk about services. I like to talk about what I love. I think you need to add culture to the business. And a lot of pawn shops don't think about the culture, don't think about leadership. Very few pawn shop managers, pawn shop owners have ever taken a leadership course, have ever learned about building a great culture. Because in order to service the client even better, in order to have that accountability to keep your metrics in order, you must be an incredible leader and build a great culture. So for me, there's a lot of people jumping on like the handbag and the luxury bandwagon without knowing how to actually read their metrics in pawn, how to actually read the metrics in sales and layaways. Stop it, don't do it. Get great at the focus and on the foundation of the business first, then add all that stuff in afterward. If you don't, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yigal, I'm going to stay on with you for a second. How does continuous learning and investing in staff really impact the competence and the value of a pawn shop? And any like pointers on resources? You can do a little self-promotion here if you'd like, but areas that people can look to get their team and themselves, training and continuous learning opportunities.
Yeah, I think investing in skills has a better return than investing in gold or diamonds. Because when you have skills, you can create so much more opportunity for yourself. Everybody thinks it's a cost, like I have to spend. It's an investment when you become a better leader. It's an investment when you learn how to read your metrics. It's an investment that gives a much bigger ROI, return on investment, when you're actually learning and up-leveling your skills. I gave a presentation today where I showed two pictures. One was Frank Kern and the other is Billie Jean, two of the biggest marketers in the world. I spent $25,000 with both of them to learn the top marketing skills that exist in the world. I've been to every conference. I've learned from every pawnbroker how to market. But until I reached above and beyond and learned from some of the top experts, and I spent a lot of money, I got that investment back. So the one thing to do at the moment is don't think about like, oh, well, how do I do handbags and how do I do sneakers and stuff like that? It's like, do I have a great culture? Am I a great leader? Is my management a great leader? If not, invest. I'll ask this question. I asked it yesterday to some people. When was the last time you did real sales training, right? Somebody outside of your organization to do sales training to your team. And one person raised their hand out of 22. And so my question was, well, how do you expect your team to sell more if you're not going to train them on how to sell? So for me, education, it's all about it. I'm all about getting more skills. It's not, first of all, it's a tax write-off. Two, and you just learn more skills and you get more education. And I think, for example, you look at somebody like Steve grew his stores to 45 stores. And Steve, tell me if I'm wrong. It wasn't because you just learned it from the pawn industry. You just learned it from other people. It's like you went outside of the box to learn and gain that knowledge, to bring in that entrepreneurial spirit and skills into the business. And that's what grew the business.
Steve Mack, I'm going to flip it over to you. Maybe talk about this, what you did when you were running Super Pawn, investing in your team culture and continuous improvement and learning.
Well, it sort of started with employee 4 when I realized one of our employees, his name was Mo. He passed on quite a while ago, but he was to me like the ultimate personality in pawn. And as soon as I joined the family business right out of college, it was my intent to scale the business. And being a really good pawnbroker takes so many diverse skills, especially if you want to be diversified in terms of lending on everything, like truly knowing everything. This is a long time ago, and it was almost 20 years ago next year since I sold Super Pawn. But really not much has changed. It's creating this consistent experience with everyone being on the same page and raising the level of everyone that is within your organization. And we looked at that as an example, and we looked towards technology because that was the focus that I wanted to help scale the organization, and that was with product valuations. Like, how can, what do pawnbrokers actually think? Now, back in the day when I started, it was a Sears and Roebuck catalog. I couldn't wait for it to come out. I would go page by page, memorize every single thing, and that would cover about 80% of the pawn shop's inventory at the time. And but I loved it. I had the passion for it. I wanted to be the best. I learned from what I believe was the Bible of valuations, and there were some other clever other blue books out that also helped in other areas, and talking and learning from other people who are in the appraisal business. But when we discovered that each and every transaction that was occurring in the stores, and that we could bridge the gap by giving the pawnbroker just a tool, an average pawnbroker tool. It made them not just a good pawnbroker, but a great pawnbroker. It didn't matter like where they came in at, how much experience they have. If you give them the tool, they rise to the level. You make it easier for them to make the valuation. So in this business, it was always, how can I lend the most? Because lending more, not less, is where you really win, because you want to grow in the loan base. And so that's where the basis of learning and education, and just to mention Yigal, yes, I mean, I brought in all different types of sales programs. I put through our employees through all these different things, and everyone got something out of every time we did it. And it was so fun. And then our organization grew, we brought in different types of people to help us understand what it took to actually make a sale. And there's never been one time that it never paid off. It always paid off big time. And it happens the next day. It's not like you have to wait long. And so, anyways, that's my experience.
Hey, Tally, I'm going to jump in here because this conversation is fantastic. We have about 20 minutes left. I know you have a number of questions still, but I wanted to take a pause and ask all of you watching and listening, if you have any questions. I'd want to make sure to get those answered rather than waiting till the end. So feel free to jump in, put any questions in the chat. I'll turn it back over to you, Tally.
Okay, awesome. This one I'm going to ask for Jerry and Steve Stallcup. So I'll start with Jerry and then we'll move over to Steve. For owners considering selling their pawn shop, what steps can they take now to ensure a smooth transition? I know we talked about, book your income. What other things can they do? Maybe baby steps, maybe big steps. I guess it depends on at what time frame they're thinking about, but maybe if you could give us a long-term and a short-term, like what steps can people be taking, actionable items?
Okay, that's a good question. So short or long term, I always recommend that they get their inventories, both pawn and retail, thoroughly cleaned up. So in the pawn book, for example, making sure that all my overdue loans are either caught up or going ahead and processed through forfeit in the retail inventory, making sure that you're keeping your front room inventories up to date. By category is usually good, jewelry, guns, general merchandise, or whatever. And really tasking your aging inventory, try to get that stuff out of your system. So you want to get your loans and your inventory as clean as possible while continuing to scrub your internal financials, making sure that everything's clearly reported, put it all into your P&Ls. Make sure that the profit and loss statements and whatever that you're reporting to the United States government through income tax returns or other, that it all ties out. Because the type of due diligence that a company is going to put you through, whether it's a well-funded private group or in particular a public company, that due diligence can be arduous. And so the more internal cleaning that you can do, which is short-term and long-term, to really get it operationally cleaned up is very important. If you're a gun dealer, making sure all your ATF stuff is up to date, you're compliant, you've done a thorough review of everything relating to the ATF. As many of you do know, the ATF is using violations as a way to revoke your licenses, and we're seeing a lot of licenses being revoked in the good old US of A, and it's not something to poke around with. And again, an acquiring group, depending on the level of sophistication they may have, the type of due diligence they're going to put you through can literally wear you out, depending on who that acquiring group is. So the more clean your financials are and how that stuff ties out and how clean your internal loan inventory, retail inventories are, which also there's a benefit to having good, clean, high-level technology systems to assist you with maintaining and monitoring that. All of those are very important. And that's the stuff that I see as the biggest if you're considering going through that, or even if at some point it might be an option for you to consider selling your business. And at the end of the day, it's like the folks I tell them, if you keep your store spotlessly clean, it's a heck of a lot easier to maintain that than it is to come in and clean it up later. And it's so refreshing to see the newer breed of operators coming in that are running high level, sophisticated, beautiful stores that have that can-do attitude. And I say it all the time, stores that are bright, clean, and friendly with smiling, friendly, happy people in there who want to serve you, just do better. And all that weighs heavily into what your options may be if you have to pull that trigger at some point and consider selling your business. Or if somebody knocks on your door or calls you on the phone and says, we'd like to buy your business. And that's what you've been seeing a lot of over the last 20 years or so. And Steve can elaborate on that one. These big companies have cold calling firms, and that's all they do is cold call stores all over the US to draw up fish. But keep your business clean, internally, externally, at every level conceivable all the time, and be ready for the unknown.
Steve, Stallcup.
Yes.
Yep, that question.
Okay.
Hand over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kathleen. So what I call this, what we're talking about, this is runway. What's my runway before I exit? And some folks don't have like a succession plan. They don't think about it. And whether you have a year, 2 years, whatever, you can't start too soon, but there's tactical things that are strategic things. The tactical things are numerous. We can just run, Jerry covered a lot of those things. I like to focus on the strategic things, and that is, let me improve my trends. Okay, what are my trends doing? Because that's what, if you're ready to go to market with your business and your trends have been trending down, it's a big problem. I don't care whether you're reporting all your income or you're doing this or that or whatever. That's a very big thing to do that we want to do is I want to fix the trends. If you have time, that's the point of the runway. If you've got, okay, I want to exit 2 years. All right, let's start right now and look at your trends. Now, if COVID hits or something like that, that's going to be hard to fix those trends. You can't do much about that. But a lot of these trends that are trending down, your loan balance trending down, your yield on loans, your yield on inventory, your margin, a lot of that's self-inflicted. And so, and it also, you know, I ran 130 stores at one point, and it was a little bit easier back then than it is now. But we picked a few things and we did them well. I think Steve talked about that. Just pick a few things, do them well. What brought us to the dance is our pawn shop, our pawn business. So the pawn loan balance, what's it doing by category, yield on loans? Fix the trends, especially if you're capable of doing so. If it's self-inflicted or there's things you can do that to gain back market share. Like I'm sitting right now at a store we're closing today here in Houston, Texas, one of the most competitive places in the world as far as pawn. And you've got to do these things. If you don't do these things, you'll get eaten alive. But there's a lot of shiny objects. And y'all talked about the handbag thing, going out there and doing all these different types of services and strategies or tactics. When we got to stick to what brought us to the dance, and that's the core pawn shop business, and that's where that's how you fix your trends, and you can go to market with confidence, saying, "Look at me, look at my story," and I want to monetize the fact that we are growing year over year. But that's, to me, that's the biggest thing. All the things that Jerry mentioned tactically, I think is very important, but strategically, like this guy here that we're selling his store today, he absolutely came back and turned this thing around. It's unbelievable the trends that he turned around in the store. And he contacted me 2 years ago, and I said, let's just wait. If you're okay with it, stir in some old man time and let's fix this. And he did, and it worked. It changed the whole landscape of what his store was worth. So hats off to him and turning that thing around. But that's how he did it.
Callie, you're muted.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask a question that Morris put in the chat. I'm going to start with Steve Mack, and then we can sort of go around the horn. So I guess when did you know that it was the right time to sell Super Pawn? And then for Steve Stallcup and Jerry, how do you help sellers know like when the right offer, what it is when it comes in? So Steve, how did you know that it was the right time to sell Super Pawn?
Well, my experience selling Super Pawn wasn't a plan. It was the plan was to sell Cash America, my systems, but inadvertently I felt I was going to share my progress in my business with Cash America to show them the impact my systems were having on my business. And So for a course of 2 years, I think 2 years is the magic number. I think if you're really thinking about exiting, you got to say, hey, I think I'm ready. And inadvertently, I'm sharing my financials with Cash America, and I was at a conference in Palm Springs. It was actually a check cashing conference. I ran into Dan Feehan and Tom Besant, it was CEO and CFO, and they said, "Boy, do we love your business?" And I go, "It's great." I go, "But what do you think about my system?" He goes, "We really like your business." And so I go, "Well, I kind of know what the valuations have been in the past. So what do you think that you're willing to offer me?" He goes, "Well, you've got some high performing stores." And I had huge loan bases at average of $600,000 per loan base. I had $3 million loan base in 2 of the stores, and many of them over $1 million. And I'm actually seeing that even today in the performance of some of the stores that people are on our Bravo systems. And they got really excited. When you have a buyer that gets excited about your business, then it's like, wow. And if the timing's right, and what's the market like? Now, this was back when gold was $300 an ounce. Some would say that I probably sold at the wrong time, but it's still today the highest price ever paid for a pawn shop chain per unit and average dollar by loan base. And that was because of all of the really hard work we put into the way they looked, the way the culture was built, the way that the retail could actually function with $1 million or $2 million loan base. You got to be really, really good, by the way, and you got to do a lot of things in order to have a successful retail operation in order to handle all that defaulted goods. And so one feeds after the other, right? And so, but I also came to the conclusion a few years before that I was ready for a change. And I was 40 years old, and I thought, I wanted to do a lot of other things, and end up making this commitment, half dozen years later, and sold the business and went into technology because I was able to exercise my dream in technology throughout the pawn business, and I loved the pawn business. And I thought, wow, okay, this is my turn to do something different. And so it was a pivot time for me, a transition. And being the 4th generation pawnbroker, I kind of hit the mark. I was happy, and I've never looked back, and I've never regretted it. And so there's a lot of I think personal preparation has to go into it.
Yeah.
You got to be ready for it. And then if you're going to do it, get your store hammered and ready. Like Steve really nailed it. Make it better. And these guys know what the key indicators are. They know exactly what these guys are looking for, and they can help coach you in driving your business in a positive direction. The trends, as Stephen mentioned, right towards the highest point and value that you can get. You just don't want to leave anything on the table, right? You want to figure out, and then Jerry said it, don't put it in a shoebox, because they ain't going to pay anything for it. And everyone that seems to think, old pawn shop guys think, hey, this is a good idea. I'm going to show them how much money I'm making under the table. It doesn't work. It works the opposite. And you're depriving yourself from putting your money into the very thing that makes you money, which is your loan base, by the way. And so that's really a long story, but that's the short story.
Jerry, what do you think about this? How do you help sellers know when the right time to sell their store is, when the right offer comes in?
Yeah, well, and Stephen really enamored kind of what happened to me in my career, because my family, we had built a 12-store chain in Dallas-Fort Worth, and these were towards the latter part of those years. These were big box, high-end, beautiful stores. And my father came up with this concept that he wanted to go through an IPO. He wanted to take the company public. So what do? I hire the same attorney that took Cash America public, this guy, Mark Livingston. and our CFO was a brother related to the CFO of Cash America. And we were getting our financials and everything internally groomed up and cleaned up. And a little company came along called First Cash out of Fort Worth. They did their initial public offering with 5 stores. They raised $5 million in 1991. And they called me out of the blue and says, "Man, we'd like to merge with y'all. Can we have this conversation?" I'm like, "Well, no. My dad and our offices were close to each other. So I go over and start talking to my dad about it. And we did have a conversation with them, and they made us a hell of an offer. At that time, we would have had about 70% of the company in equity. It was an all stock deal with a little bit of cash. They did send us over a letter of intent. And when the LOI was coming through my fax machine, my phone was ringing, and it was Jack Doherty, the founder of Cash America's, on the phone. He's like, "Jerry, I heard a little rumor, and I just want you to know Cash America would be very upset if the best opportunity in Dallas Fort Worth got away from us. And cash is cash. I'd like to come over tomorrow and see those 2 big stores over there that's eating our lunch and made a conversation at one of my board of directors meetings last week. Can we make that happen?" So I go over and talk to my dad, and goes, "Yeah, what's Jack want?" And I said, "Well, he'd like to come over in the morning." He said 7:30, and he wanted to go see our 2 big stores we had just opened. And so we made that happen. And because we had already been modeling our financials on a per store level, we were outperforming Cash America about 2-to-1 on revenue and net income. So if we'd gone through the IPO, it would have been very sexy. And 28 days later, we closed that transaction and sold that company, Cash America. And at the time, as a comparison, based on revenues and operating income, it was the most they'd ever paid for a multi-store acquisition on a per store level. And then we turned around and rented all the buildings to them, which even the combined company has been renting from us for 32 years. We thought $10 million was a lot of money back in 1992, but we did the math the other day. We generated about 19 million in rental income. Now, Cash America and First Cash merged. First Cash just called me, "Want to buy your buildings?" I'm like, "Well, we don't owe any money. If you're not offering me a cap rate of about 25 times, I can take it to a board of 3 and get that deal done." My brother's like, "What happened?" Click. And so the short version is, you may not know when the time is right, but I can tell you that it's like going public. The window's open and the window's closed. The window for acquisitions is open right now because the public companies are being favored very well on Wall Street. They had a pretty good run last quarters because their gold sales have been up. First Cash just did another major acquisition. They're approaching 3,000 stores between North and South America. They're being favored very well. Easy Corp is on the move. They're hitting around 1,000 stores right now. One of the private groups has been taken out, which was Smart Financial. There's another pretty good sized group out there, and there's a handful of smaller ones. But it has to do with what market you're in and what's going on. But because the valuations are running pretty strong for the publics, right now is a pretty good time to start shopping your deal if you're considering it, because the value proposition could change with the next legislative change in Washington, D.C. They rate us all down to 3%, and the show's over for most of us. And that could happen just like that. So get your ducks in a row now is what I've been telling everybody. Why not be ready for the inevitable, right?
All right, we've got 5 minutes left, so we're going to go around one more round robin. I'm going to give you 2 questions, and you can pick whichever one you want to answer. So the first is, how do you foresee advancements in technology impacting valuation practices, or if there's any other emerging trends that shape the future valuation in pawn shops? So what kind of technology do you think could impact valuation practices, or other types of developments that could shape the future in pawn shop valuations? So I'm going to start with Jerry. Go ahead.
So I'm a big proponent of technology. I believe more is always better. We've certainly been pro Bravo since y'all showed up, and it's an advantage, because the more that I could illustrate as a business owner how advanced my operational systems are, my crew and my systems. And Yigal hit on some really important points too, the culture of my team and the quality of my operations. All of this is very important. But technology does play a big portion of that, because acquiring groups are going to come in and drill down on the information. And the more information that I can have readily available that can be looked at in infinite directions. Steve hit on it too, because I found out years later what you think the public company wants you for might be something completely different. You may never know why they want to take you out, and you may. But IT systems are extremely important. Healthy online presence, extremely important. Web presence, extremely important. Social media, all of that is important to illustrate how well you are as an operator as far as being as advanced as you can be with the tools that are readily available. And we are very critical on technology. It's very important.
Steve Stallcup.
Yes, Brittany. Yeah, so I'm not going to touch the technology thing. I mean, there's a lot of people on here that could advise better on that and the consulting piece. But embrace it. I mean, it makes your job better, makes your business better. But just improve the things that are important, the assets, your loans and your inventory. What's my return on both? Your staff, your culture. Those are the things that you can wrap your arms around. And as far as that goes, that's embrace technology all you can, but don't do it at the peril of ignoring the other things, because that's, to me, there's priority in doing that. You want to stay competitive, you got to embrace the fundamentals of the pawn business. I sell pawn shops. That's what I do. I don't operate them anymore, so I don't claim to know all the new technological edges that you can have. But you've got to do those three things: your earning assets and your culture and your staff. You got to focus on those, and that's going to drive the valuation of your business. But pick a few things, you do them well, and let get representation when you go to exit the business. If you decide to do that, you're not going to do it forever. Get representation, somebody that can monetize those things that maybe you're not doing. We want to monetize those no matter what, because the buyer will do them. And listen, somebody said something earlier today is very important. The better you operate your business, the more profitable it's going to be. It's going to have, it may be the difference from you having one buyer that's interested or three buyers. They don't want to buy the podunk little store that's out in rural wherever. They will, but they're going to beat you up on the price. But if you are the podunk little store out in rural whatever, and you've got it running, hit on all cylinders, you're killing it, you're trending upward, you could probably bring three buyers in, maybe one public and two privates. But that's what we do. That's what we want to do, is monetize those the upside and leverage the competition. If there's only one buyer, there's no competition to leverage.
Yigal.
The number one complaint for pawnbrokers today is finding good people. And I think that if you use great technology, you can automate a lot of the process. Yes, it's a people business, but a lot of the back end can be automated. And I think that the number one trend that needs to be looked at is AI, from social media marketing to writing emails to look at AI, keep it right here because it's coming down really, really harsh. My podcast team, I said my podcast, we run it through an AI thing that can now turn it into 15 shorts and 58 reels and all this type of stuff. But again, it's all automation. And I think that, when Steve was looking at this a long time ago, it was all about like, how do I automate the process, make it easier? And I think even today, it's more important. How do we automate it, use technology to make our lives easier, less stressed out, less overwhelmed?
Steve Mack.
Well, I mean, let's just look at what happened just here recently. Smart Financial got purchased, and we're on the forefront in terms of helping businesses turn the corner. And to the people that are using our system on Bravo, use every feature, because every feature drives efficiency, drives more profit, so you can put more money in your loan base. Because at the end of the day, I think we'll all agree that that's a primary factor that will raise the eyebrows of, and many people, not just one. And so 18 months ago, we installed Bravo into Smart Financial. It was owned by Fortress, and it was a startup. They started from scratch. Remarkable story. Only did it in I think 6 or 7 years, and grew it to a nice sized company. And Bart Bowling, the CEO, who had operated Bravo before, pled with the company when he took over as CEO, you got to put Bravo in. You got to put Bravo in. We can turn the corner. Bart was successful. It took a long time for us to convince the board to make the shift. They had, when they bought those stores, they were running on 2 or 3 or 4 different systems. And once they did, it accelerated the growth. It helped with the visibility of inventory. All the online presence. We hadn't even had a chance to put E4473 through the whole company to, shift even more resources into providing more automation to the business. We could have easily increased the business 20-30% in the next 6 to 12 months. So for those that aren't using Bravo and are thinking, like, get on the system so you can have the tools so that you can operate your store to the optimal level in order for you to have the resources and the best chance to grow your business so you can have a huge loan base. And that's technology, and that's what's going to help. Now, so many people that have sizable organizations really are like, oh, that's the last thing I want to do is change systems, and it's going to disrupt my business. In their case, because they were in trouble. They went from trouble to being supersized, and they got a phenomenal valuation from First Cash. And so, it hurts us as a company. We hate seeing customers get bought. But when we do make the transition, like with these companies, they know a couple things. When they're on Bravo, the data is good. The inventory is good. The financials are right. They know that because our processes and compliance and the things that we do, they can count on. And nothing can really disappoint the buyer and disappoint the seller even more is when they find out, oh, I have some inventory missing. Oh, my loan base isn't quite right. And it kind of hurts the end result. And with Bravo, when you do make the transition, you sell to the big boys, you have a successful transaction more times than not.
All right, we're at time. That was so fun. I hope you all had as much fun as I did.